So last year, you guys might remember that protest that occurred in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a few days after the murder of Alton Sterling. There were a number of Black Lives Matter people there and just protesters in general. It was a sizable crowd, but you saw the usual heavy-handed, over-militarized response from the state. And some of you guys might remember the pictures and the videos of just like a gang of these jackbooted agents of state and racial violence, you know, basically just rounding up a bunch of like dozens of protesters. They were in this neighborhood, and they were all on private property of different people who lived in the neighborhood. I mean, it got so bad to where they were like yanking people out of the houses. And, they had the tanks there. They had the assault weapons and the gas masks. It looked like something you would see from a documentary on fascism and dictatorship. It was completely overboarding. It was completely over the top. Well, one of the ASRVs that was there that day claimed that, you know, someone threw something at him and he sustained quote unquote serious injuries. And he's not being named, and quite frankly, his name is largely irrelevant. What is more relevant, however, is the recent ruling that has come down by a federal judge in Louisiana, basically saying that since Black Lives Matter is a movement based on a hashtag and not an actual entity, Black Lives Matter can't be sued because the guy tried to sue Black Lives Matter. And I thought I bet he figured he was actually doing something. You know, I bet he figured, yeah, I'm gonna show them, I'm gonna sue Black Lives Matter, yada yada yada. Because I remember when this story originally popped up, when he tried to sue them originally. And so, like I said, that decision has recently come down, and it wasn't in his favor. So I'm gonna read this article to you guys. This is from NPR. It says, a hashtag can be a powerful force in corralling social movements of the digital age. Hashtag Black Lives Matter being a case in point. But neither a hashtag nor a social movement can be sued, a federal judge in Louisiana ruled Thursday after a Baton Rouge police officer, whose name has not been made public, surprise, surprise, filed a lawsuit against Black Lives Matter and prominent activist D. Ray McKesson. In the suit, the officer said he was seriously injured during a protest last year that, quote, turned into a riot. No, that's not what happened. If you go back and you watch the videos, the police in that case looked like exactly what I said. It looked like something from a documentary on fascism. And he's claiming a piece of concrete or, quote, rock-like substance, so it's not even verified what it was thrown at him by an unidentified demonstrator. So they don't know who threw whatever hit him at him. So they don't know, and so he figured he could just sue Black Lives Matter, which you'd have to be an idiot to think that you could actually do that. And I'm surprised, quite frankly, that it took this long for this ruling to come down. Now, it says the plaintiff argued Black Lives Matter could be sued. U.S. District Judge Brian A. Jackson writes, because it is a, quote, national unincorporated association, with McKesson, quote, its leader and founder, who was, quote, in charge of the protests. But in throwing out the suit, Jackson writes, Black Lives Matter is a social movement and cannot be sued, however, in a similar way that a person cannot plausibly sue other social movements such as the civil rights movement, the LGBTQ rights movement, or the Tea Party movement. Activists launched Black Lives Matter online 4 years ago following the shooting death of Trayvon Martin, but the hashtag quickly spilled into the streets, morphing into a movement against police brutality, racism, and injustice. And it says, quote, it's organized, they have meetings, they solicit money, they have national chapters. This is what the police officer's attorney is trying to claim. And his attorney is claiming this shows a level of national organization. But in his decision, Jackson notes that the plaintiff, identified as John Doe, because they're protecting him, is attempting to sue a hashtag for reasons that should be obvious. A hashtag, which is an expression that categorizes or classifies a person's thought, is not a juridical person and therefore lacks the capacity to be sued. While a movement or thought cannot be sued, Jackson notes that an entity associated with a movement can be sued, such as the NAACP, the Human Rights Campaign, or Tea Party Patriots. As for McKesson, Jackson writes that he was exercising his constitutional rights to association and protected speech in the protests, and there is no evidence that he incited violence. Okay, so that's basically the gist of what happened. Obviously, you know, the idiot that thought that he was going to sue Black Lives Matter was clearly wrong. And I don't honestly think he thought that this was going to fly. I think that he was just throwing crap at the wall, seeing if it would stick or not. Thankfully, it didn't stick. You know, so I don't usually do videos about positive outcomes in the criminal injustice system, which it still is. Do not get that twisted. But this was one of a handful of positive outcomes that you will hear about from time to time. Ruling in favor of the cop would have set a horrible precedent. So luckily, you know, free speech went out, and you can't sue a person for exercising their constitutional rights. That's just not possible. And these very suspect, shady, possibly white supremacist actors within the state, and who represent the state when they go out in the street and quote unquote serve and protect, they should know stuff like this. And so there's not much to say about this other than that. Now, watch out for other attempts that are in play in different states around the country where you have these state legislatures that are passing anti-protesting bills. And if something gets passed in the future, you might see a situation where this might end up different. This ruling might have come down differently because of a law that was recently passed. But until that happens, I advise people to just stay in the fight, stay in the struggle, and do not let these agents of state and racial violence intimidate you into cowering, because I'm a firm believer that when someone is killed in an unlawful, illegal, and unconstitutional way, there should be an equal and opposite response from the population. To just sit back and not do nothing is low-key approval, and it's kind of defeatist to just sit back and not do anything when you have people being gunned down in the street. Our voices have to be heard. Protesting shouldn't be seen as the one and only be-all, end-all solution. It has to be followed up by further action, political action, economic action. But I still believe that we should have our voices heard. People are going strong in St. Louis. They've been protesting in St. Louis for days now. And we just have to continue to do that because it's clearly agitating them. They clearly don't like it. Until a law gets passed, until we get not just criminal justice reform, but until we have some radical solutions, some really transformative policies that get initiated on the federal level that the states are forced to comply with, because it would be illegal not to at that point. This is an option that we have to keep using, and this is something that we have at our disposal. As long as it just stays nonviolent and we don't use tactics that you find white supremacists using, we will continue to put in that work and keep our heads up. I just want everybody to stay safe and not allow their emotions to get the best of them when they are out here in the streets, standing up against people and standing up against a system that has been given the ability to just murder with impunity.